The silence has been broken, and when a 24-time Grand Slam champion decides to speak up, the entire tennis world better stop what they are doing and pay attention. Novak Djokovic, arguably the greatest men's tennis player of all time, has just publicly called out the WTA for their treatment of Eala, and what he revealed is absolutely shocking. We're not talking about a minor complaint here. We're not talking about some petty grievance that'll be forgotten by tomorrow. We're talking about systematic, calculated mistreatment of one of the sport's brightest young stars, and it's been happening right under everyone's noses. The Filipino tennis sensation, the pride of over 110 million people, has been fighting battles both on and off the court, and what Djokovic just exposed will make you question everything you thought you knew about fairness in professional tennis. This isn't just about one tournament or one bad call. This is about a pattern of behavior that's been undermining a young champion's career, and now that Djokovic has shined a spotlight on it, there's no going back. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is going to completely change how you see professional tennis. Let me paint you a picture of what just went down at the Australian Open, because this is where everything came to a head. Eala, the absolute best tennis player the Philippines has ever produced, walked into one of the four most prestigious tournaments in the entire world carrying the dreams of her nation on her shoulders. This isn't just any player we're talking about. This is a young woman who has already made history multiple times over. She's broken barriers that seemed impossible to break. She's achieved things that no Filipino athlete in tennis has ever even come close to achieving. She's inspired an entire generation of young athletes in her country to pick up a racket and believe that they too can compete on the world stage. The expectations were massive, and rightfully so. This was supposed to be Eala's moment to shine on one of tennis's biggest stages, to show the world exactly what she's capable of, to cement her place among the sport's elite. But here's where things take a dark turn. She was knocked out in the first round. Now, before you start thinking, well, that happens in sports, people lose matches all the time, let me stop you right there. Because according to Djokovic and many others who've been watching closely, this wasn't just about what happened on the court. This wasn't about her having an off day or running into an opponent who played out of their mind. The WTA'S management of her fixture, the decisions they made about when and where she would play, those decisions played a huge role in her elimination. And Novak Djokovic is not holding back in calling them out for it. Here's what Djokovic said, and I want you to really absorb these words because they're coming from someone who knows exactly what he's talking about. He acknowledged that you could argue it was poor scheduling. He pointed out that maybe, just maybe, they could have scheduled her on a bigger court. And then he drove home the point that really matters. Eala is coming from the Philippines, where she's not just a tennis player, she's a national phenomenon. She's the biggest tennis player that country has ever produced. The Philippines is a massive country with enormous interest in what she does. And despite all of that, despite her achievements, despite her significance, the WTA assigned her to a smaller court. Let that sink in for a moment. The organization that's supposed to be promoting women's tennis globally, that's supposed to be showcasing talent from all corners of the world, that's supposed to be growing the game and giving opportunities to rising stars, they looked at Eala, a player who represents over 100 million people, a player who's literally making history, a player who draws massive attention and interest, and they said, nah, put her on a smaller court. That's not just poor management. That's disrespect. That's the WTA essentially saying that despite everything she's accomplished, despite who she is and what she represents, she doesn't deserve a showcase court. She doesn't deserve the same treatment as players from traditional tennis powerhouses. She doesn't deserve to have her achievements recognized and honored through appropriate scheduling decisions. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Is a court assignment really that big of a deal? Does it actually matter where you play? And let me tell you, as someone who's followed tennis for years, as someone who understands the sport at a deep level, absolutely yes, it matters. It matters tremendously. The court you play on affects everything about your performance and your experience. The atmosphere is completely different on a showcase court versus being relegated to some side court where barely anyone is watching. The energy from the crowd, the number of fans in attendance, the intensity of the environment, all of it creates a completely different psychological dynamic. When you're playing on a big court with thousands of people watching, with cameras everywhere, with that electric atmosphere, it elevates your game. It brings out the best in you. It creates the kind of pressure that champions thrive under. But beyond just the tangible factors like crowd energy and atmosphere, there's something even more important at play here. Court assignments send a message to everyone paying attention. They tell players, fans, sponsors, media outlets, and the entire tennis community who the organization thinks matters and who doesn't. Who deserves the spotlight and who can be shuffled off to the side. Who's considered a draw, someone people want to watch, and who's considered expendable. When you assign a player of Eala's caliber, a player with her achievements, a player who represents an entire nation's tennis dreams, to a smaller court, you're making a statement. You're saying, we don't think you're important enough. We don't think your story matters enough. We don't think the fans who want to watch you compete deserve access to you on a major court. That's offensive. That's insulting. And that's exactly what Novak Djokovic is calling out. But here's where this story gets even darker, even more troubling, and I need you to buckle up because what I'm about to tell you is going to make your blood absolutely boil. This court assignment controversy at the Australian Open isn't an isolated incident. This isn't just one questionable decision that we can chalk up to a scheduling oversight. This is part of a systematic pattern of questionable treatment that Eala has been experiencing throughout her time competing at the highest levels of professional tennis. And the evidence is absolutely damning. Let me take you back to the Australian Open qualifiers, because what happened there is so egregious, so blatantly wrong, that it still shocks me every time I think about it. Eala was in the middle of a critical rally during the first set. This is the kind of moment where every single point matters, where momentum can shift in an instant, where one call can literally change the entire trajectory of the match. She hit a ball that was clearly in. And I'm not exaggerating when I say clearly. I'm not talking about a close call where you'd need to review the replay multiple times to be sure. I'm talking crystal clear, no question about it, everyone in the entire stadium could see it was in. The mark on the court was visible. The trajectory was obvious. By every objective measure that exists in the sport of tennis, it was her point. There should have been zero doubt. Zero controversy. Zero discussion. But then came the call. Out. The linesman called it out. And Eala was visibly annoyed, and here's why her frustration was completely justified. This was the second time that the exact same linesman had made a questionable call against her in that very same match. The second time. Let me repeat that for emphasis. The same official making questionable calls against the same player multiple times in the same match. At what point does this stop being innocent human error and start being something else entirely? At what point do we acknowledge that there's a pattern here that demands scrutiny and investigation? But wait, because it gets so much worse. Instead of simply awarding the point to her opponent, which would have been the wrong decision but at least it would have been a decision, at least it would have followed the standard procedures of tennis officiating, the officials decided to replay the point entirely. Now, if you know anything about how tennis is supposed to be officiated, if you understand the basic rules and procedures that have governed this sport for decades, you know that this is not standard procedure. This isn't how tennis works. You don't just get to replay points because you're unsure about a call. You don't get to say, well, we're not really sure if it was in or out, so let's just do it over again. That's not tennis. That's not how the sport has ever operated. Either the ball is in or the ball is out. Period. Full stop. You make a decision based on what you saw, you commit to that decision, and the match continues. Those are the rules. Those have always been the rules. But apparently when it comes to Eala, those rules don't apply. Apparently, officials can second-guess themselves, can make up new procedures on the spot, can decide that the established rules of tennis just don't matter when she's the one competing. How is that fair? How is that acceptable? How is that creating a level playing field where athletes compete based solely on their talent and preparation? And here's what I absolutely love about Eala, what shows you the kind of champion mentality and strength of character this young woman possesses. She didn't just meekly accept what was happening. She didn't just shrug her shoulders and walk back to the baseline like nothing was wrong. She walked right up to that chair umpire, calm but radiating absolute firmness and determination, looked them directly in the eye, and said 5 words that sent chills down my spine when I heard them. I know what you're doing. The confidence in her voice. The steel in her eyes. The complete refusal to be intimidated or pushed around or treated unfairly without speaking up. She knew exactly what was happening. She recognized the pattern of questionable calls and irregular procedures. She understood that this wasn't just about one bad call or one moment of confusion. This was about something bigger, something more systematic, something that needed to be called out. Think about the courage that takes. Think about the mental strength and backbone required to stand up to officials, to challenge authority, to refuse to let yourself be victimized, all while trying to maintain your focus and composure and compete at the highest level of professional tennis. Most players would have been completely rattled by this situation. Most players would have let it get in their head, would have started doubting themselves and their abilities, would have lost focus and composure and watched their performance crumble. But not Alex Eala. She stood her ground, she made her position crystal clear, and then you know what she did? She went out there and won that match anyway. Despite the questionable calls that went against her. Despite the irregular procedures that disadvantaged her. Despite the attempts to throw her off her game and undermine her confidence. She pushed through all of it, stayed focused on what mattered, and made it all the way to the finals of the Australian Open qualifiers. That is champion-level mental toughness and resilience right there. But hold on, because the story gets even more disturbing. Let me tell you about what happened during her match against Iga Swiatek, because this incident is so troubling, so blatantly inappropriate, that it raises serious questions about what's really going on behind the scenes. Now, if you don't follow tennis closely, let me give you some crucial context about who Iga Swiatek is. We're talking about one of the absolute best players in the entire world. Multiple Grand Slam champion. Former world number 1. An absolute powerhouse on the court who has dominated women's tennis in recent years. For a young player like Alex Eala to even be competitive against someone of Swiatek's caliber is already an incredible achievement in itself. Just holding your own and not getting blown off the court is impressive when you're facing someone at that level. But Alex Eala wasn't just competitive. She was playing absolutely brilliantly. She was matching Swiatek shot for shot, trading ground strokes with one of the hardest hitters in the game, holding her own against someone who's won multiple Grand Slam titles. The momentum was building in Eala's favor. You could feel it happening. She was threatening to pull off what would have been one of the biggest upsets of the entire tournament. Her confidence was growing with every point. The crowd was getting into it, sensing that something special might be happening. She was right there on the verge of potentially shocking the tennis world and defeating one of its biggest stars. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, completely disrupting the flow of the match and Eala's momentum, a referee decided that this was the perfect moment to confront her about items in her backpack. Let me repeat that because I want you to understand just how absurd and suspicious this is. In the middle of a crucial match against one of the best players on the entire planet, during a moment when Alex Eala was building serious momentum and confidence, during a time when her focus needed to be laser-sharp on the tennis she was playing and the tactics she was executing, an official decided that this was the appropriate time to make a scene about her backpack. Not during a natural break in the action. Not during a changeover when players are sitting down anyway. Not between sets when there's already a pause in play. Right in the middle of the match, right when she was building momentum, right when she was on the verge of potentially achieving something incredible. But here's the part that takes this from questionable timing to something that looks an awful lot like deliberate psychological warfare. They didn't just quietly and professionally address the issue. They didn't pull her aside discreetly and handle it with the respect that a professional athlete deserves. They made the announcement loud enough for the entire audience to hear. They broadcast it to thousands of spectators in the stadium and millions watching at home around the world. They made absolutely sure that everyone heard them essentially accusing her of being some kind of rule breaker, attempting to humiliate her publicly, to embarrass her in front of the entire global tennis community. The referee literally announced, "It's confirmed you cannot use it," making it sound like she was trying to cheat, like she was attempting to gain some unfair advantage, like she was some kind of villain who needed to be called out and shamed in front of everyone watching. Think about what that does to a player's mental state. You're in the zone. You're executing your game plan. You're competing at the absolute highest level against one of the best players in the world. Your confidence is building. Your shots are landing. You're right there on the edge of achieving something remarkable. And suddenly, without warning, you're being publicly called out, embarrassed, made to feel like you've done something wrong, all over something that could have been handled quietly and professionally in about 30 seconds during the next changeover. This is psychological warfare. There's no other way to describe it. This is a calculated attempt to rattle her, to throw her off her game, to disrupt her momentum, to make her doubt herself and lose focus at the exact moment when she needed her confidence and concentration the most. This kind of behavior has absolutely no place in professional sports. Officials are supposed to be neutral arbiters who enforce the rules fairly and create an environment where athletes can compete on a level playing field. What they're not supposed to do is create situations designed to undermine a player's mental state during the most crucial moments of competition. And this brings us right back to why Novak Djokovic's statement is so incredibly important and why it's creating such massive waves throughout the tennis community. Djokovic isn't just some casual observer offering hot takes from the sidelines. He's not some commentator who watches a few matches and thinks he knows what's happening. This is one of the greatest tennis players who has ever lived. 24 Grand Slam titles. Nearly 2 decades competing at the absolute pinnacle of the sport. He's faced every possible situation, every type of pressure, every kind of challenge that exists in professional tennis. He's competed under every condition imaginable against the best players in the world. He knows what it's like to face bias and unfair treatment himself. He knows intimately what fair, professional officiating looks like versus what questionable, biased management looks like. When someone with Djokovic's credentials, experience, achievements, and deep understanding of professional tennis at the highest level decides to speak up about an issue like this, people listen. And they absolutely should listen because what he's saying makes perfect sense to anyone who's been paying attention to what's been happening to Eala. She deserves better than what she's been getting from the WTA. She deserves fair treatment. She deserves to be given the same opportunities and respect as every other player on the tour. She deserves to have her achievements recognized and honored through appropriate scheduling and court assignments. She deserves to compete without officials making questionable calls or creating unnecessary distractions during crucial moments. She deserves what every athlete deserves, which is a fair chance to compete based solely on her talent, preparation, and performance. The WTA needs to take a long, hard, honest look at how they are managing situations involving Eala and other players from non-traditional tennis nations. Court assignments shouldn't be arbitrary decisions made without considering a player's significance, achievements, and the fan base they represent. When you have a player who is literally the greatest tennis player her country has ever produced, who represents over 100 million people, who has already made history multiple times in her young career, who draws enormous interest and attention from a massive market, that player deserves a showcase court. That's not asking for preferential treatment. That's basic respect and acknowledgement of achievement and significance. Officiating needs to be consistent, fair, and professional across all matches and all players regardless of where they come from or how much traditional power their country has in the tennis world. If a ball is clearly in, it should be called in, period. If officials make a mistake, they should acknowledge it and apply the established rules of tennis as they are written, not make up new procedures on the spot that benefit some players over others. If there's an issue with equipment or backpacks or anything else, it should be handled professionally, discreetly, and respectfully, not broadcast to the entire stadium as public humiliation designed to undermine a player's confidence. Young, talented players from smaller tennis nations like the Philippines shouldn't have to fight against systematic bias and poor management on top of fighting incredibly skilled opponents on the court. The competition is already hard enough. The pressure of representing an entire nation is already intense enough. The challenge of succeeding at the highest level of professional tennis is difficult enough without having to constantly wonder whether officials are going to make questionable calls against you, whether scheduling decisions are going to undermine your opportunities to showcase your talent, whether you're going to be publicly embarrassed over trivial issues during the most crucial moments of your matches. Eala has already overcome so much just to get to where she is right now. She's broken through barriers that seemed absolutely impossible to break. She's achieved things that no Filipino tennis player in history has ever achieved before. She's inspired an entire generation of young athletes in her country to pick up a racket and dream big, to believe that they too can compete on the world stage regardless of where they come from. She's done all of this while facing obstacles and challenges that players from traditional tennis powerhouses like the United States, Australia, or European nations never have to even think about. Limited access to world-class training facilities growing up. Fewer opportunities for high-level competitive matches during her developmental years. Less infrastructure and institutional support for tennis development in her country. And now, apparently, questionable treatment from the very organization that's supposed to be promoting and supporting women's tennis globally. But here's what gives me genuine hope for the future. Here's what makes me believe that things are actually going to change for the better. Powerful voices like Novak Djokovic are speaking up and using their platform to shine a light on these issues. People are noticing what's been happening. Fans around the world are paying attention and asking hard questions. The tennis community is starting to demand answers about whether Eala and other players from non-traditional tennis nations are being treated fairly. And when you have one of the greatest players in the history of the sport publicly calling out the WTA for poor management and questionable treatment, that creates real pressure for meaningful change. That creates accountability where there wasn't any before. That makes it much harder for these patterns of behavior to continue unchallenged and unexamined. Eala has the talent. That's not even a question at this point. Anyone who's watched her play, anyone who's seen her compete at the highest levels, knows she has absolutely world-class ability. She has the mental toughness and resilience. She's proven that time and time again by overcoming adversity, questionable officiating, public humiliation attempts, and still competing at the highest level with grace and determination. She has the work ethic and dedication that separates good players from great ones. She has the unwavering support of an entire nation of over 100 million people standing behind her. And now she has influential voices like Novak Djokovic speaking up on her behalf, using their credibility and platform to make sure the world knows what's been happening and demanding that it changes. The ball is now in the WTA'S court, and they have a choice to make. They can acknowledge that their decisions haven't always been appropriate or fair. They can commit to ensuring consistent, professional officiating across all matches regardless of which players are competing. They can ensure that players from all countries, not just the traditional tennis powerhouses, are given the respect, opportunities, and treatment that their achievements deserve. They can recognize that growing the global game and expanding tennis's reach means properly supporting and showcasing talent from emerging markets like the Philippines and Southeast Asia. Or they can continue down the path they've been on and face increasing scrutiny, criticism, and pressure from legends like Djokovic, from fans around the world who are tired of seeing talented players treated unfairly, and from sponsors and media who understand the value of fairness and integrity in sports. I know which path I'm hoping they choose. And I think you do too. So what do you think about all of this? Do you agree with Novak Djokovic that the WTA has been systematically mismanaging Eala's treatment? Have you noticed this disturbing pattern of questionable calls, irregular procedures, and decisions that seem designed to disadvantage her? Are you as frustrated and angry as I am about what's been happening to this incredibly talented young champion? Drop your thoughts in the comments below right now. I want to hear what you think about this situation. I want to know if you've seen other examples of unfair treatment toward Eala or other players from smaller tennis nations. I want to hear your predictions about whether the WTA is actually going to take Djokovic's criticism seriously and make meaningful changes. And let's show some absolutely massive support for Eala down in the comments. This young woman has already overcome so much, has already achieved things that seemed impossible, and she's going to continue rising and making history despite all these obstacles being thrown in her path. She's got world-class talent. She's got champion-level mental toughness. She's got the heart and determination of a true warrior. She's got an entire nation supporting her every step of the way. And now she's got powerful voices like Novak Djokovic speaking up on her behalf, making sure the tennis world knows exactly what's been happening and demanding that it stops. If you found value in this deep dive into what's really going on with Eala and the WTA, if you appreciate content that doesn't just skim the surface but really examines the patterns and asks the tough questions that need to be asked, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss when we upload new content. Give this video a massive thumbs up to help it reach more tennis fans who need to know about this situation and understand what's really happening. Share this video with your friends who follow tennis. Post it in your tennis groups, forums, and social media. Let's spread awareness about what's really happening in the sport we all love and create pressure for the changes that need to happen. Until next time, keep fighting for fairness and integrity in tennis, keep supporting talented players like Eala who deserve so much better than what they've been getting, and I'll see you in the next video.